Hi, Gemini. Welcome to your April 2019 Astro Update. I'm Raina, and this is a month that is very social for you because the 11th house is totally featured. And the 11th house is the house of your friendships, of groups that you belong to. But I want to stress that groups can be professional groups, or if you, let's say you have your own business and you want to get the word out and you have a bunch of friends or other types of associations, you might say, hey, why don't I take advantage of this and tell them about my business, my product, and I'll have a built-in audience already, or, what would you call not an audience, but I would have a built-in clientele base. And so you may be doing this on a professional basis, or if you work in a corporation, in a corporate environment where you have to schmooze people, this is a great time for that, or it just may be that you're going to do that. But I have a feeling you're going to be building a network because in addition to the sun being in this house as the month begins, there is a new moon in Aries in that house on the 5th. And so new moons can be new beginnings, planting seeds. In other words, something will come to fruition, perhaps in April, that is along the lines of expanding your social network. And the 11th house is also the house of friendships, of hopes and wishes, okay? And so the 10th house is your professional life, in other words, your career. And the 11th house is your hopes and wishes, which are also called long-term goals. And so this is about you fulfilling some of these things as well. So with the new moon in this house, you could be planting seeds for maybe your dream life. And all of these things could come together in some fashion. If you're doing the type of work that you love, then that can really feed into some of your other long-range goals, because maybe you're living in a different place. Maybe you are associating with different people. That's another thing. With this new moon in the 11th house, you may be making friendships, making these connections. On the 10th, we have a Jupiter retrograde in Sagittarius, and this is a friendly angle to you, a sextile. This is affecting the opposite house, the 7th house of committed partnership. So again, we're talking about these connections with others, although this is going to be more on a one-on-one basis. Since Jupiter has gone into Sagittarius, Gemini, you may have, especially if you have your own business, but you may have gained in clients. And this would have been probably since November. Of course, I'm doing this as a general forecast because your individual chart is going to be different in terms of timing. But in general, this will be your 7th house. And this means that if you have your own business, you may have found a way to increase your clientele base already, and maybe you've had more clients than you know what to do with. This can also be great for committed partnership. And so we have Jupiter retrograding in this area. So what can that mean? Well, Jupiter is a very benevolent planet. I always hesitate in calling something benevolent, or, the opposite would be malevolent, or, benign, or, malicious, or whatever you want to call it. I don't want to use those terms because sometimes easy influences or easy aspects can be quite, they can be challenging in the sense that the individual takes them for granted because everything is flowing so nicely that they they might not, they don't see any resistance, and they might just kind of procrastinate and say, well, I'll do this later. When you have a lot of challenges, it's like the rubber meets the road, and it kind of spurs you on to take action sometimes, or a lot of times. And sometimes when things are just happening very nicely, you may not even appreciate it or give it much thought. So I want to make that clear, but I will say that Jupiter as a retrograding planet can actually still provide you blessings. And this would be blessings or luck, if you will, that you didn't take advantage of, or opportunities, I like to say more than that you didn't take advantage of the first time around. So maybe there were clients that, because you had so many of them, you had to put them on a back burner, and now you're more free to take them on. And another thing that I want to state about Jupiter retrograding is that you might see a bit of a slowdown. If you've had expansion, you might see a little bit of contraction, but it's temporary. Jupiter is a big planet, so any influences we have to assume are going to show up. I've experienced this myself. Now, I am a Sagittarius sun, so the ruler being Jupiter, and maybe that would impact me more than somebody else. But in any case, just keep that in mind, that could affect that sector. And of course, with marriage or the equivalent relationship, maybe you have come a long way with a certain relationship. I'm talking about specifically a romantic relationship that is a committed partnership. And maybe you were planning even a wedding or something like that, and you've put that on the back burner for some reason. Jupiter is about expansion, and there's no greater expansion when it comes to a romantic relationship than making it official. And looking at it from the marriage perspective, if you're planning, especially if it's a big wedding, you may either scale it back, or you may find that something is delayed with it. But that doesn't mean that it's going to not happen. Let's put it that way. Jupiter will go direct in August, just to let you know. So on the 17th, we have Mercury going into Aries. So Mercury is your ruler, and it's going into yet another planet going into the 11th house. And so I think this will even boost your ability to reach out to others, because you are ruled by Mercury, and in that 11th house, it can make it very easy for you to communicate, what you are desiring. And the other thing about this is you may just be back and forth more with your contacts, whether it's friends or whether it's professional networking, and thinking of those long-range goals. There's something else I wanted to say about this. Well, you had the Mercury retrograde in the 10th house of career. So this is when Mercury is fully out of its shadow as it enters this house on the 17th. So it's possible that there has been something with your career that was a little bit slowed down or somehow distorted. If you were looking for a job and or a career matter, and there was a communication breakdown, even after Mercury went direct at the end of March, you may still find that there was something to iron out, and now it's fully dealt with. And maybe you finally have gotten some paperwork sorted out with a new company that you are working for, or maybe they were giving you some kind of recommendation and it was delayed. On the 19th, we have the second full moon in Libra, this at 29 degrees, and this is that fifth house. This is a fellow air sign, so this is a trine. This is what we would call the easiest angle or aspect, and you've had two of these full moons in the fifth house of romance. So, who knows what's going on here? I just talked about the marriage house. So, I guess it's possible that there were some Gemini individuals who have been having an affair, or maybe something that you are trying to end, that you've had a hard time ending because you are involved in a more serious relationship. So that could be something that is really put to bed, pardon the pun. Another thing about this is, if you are an artist, this could be a very good time, because you may have been having like wonderful ideas, and you may have in this last 30 days, you may have been like coming up with a brilliant idea, but you didn't know where to take it, and now you do. Full moons can bring things into illumination. Maybe you're finishing a project, who knows, a creative project, or launching a business, your own business. That's a fifth house as well. I'll tell you something, Gemini, be very careful if you don't want kids, because the fifth house can be conceiving children, and, and it's also the house of recreational sex, so need I say more? However, if you have been experiencing infertility issues, this may be the time at the full moon at 29 degrees, because it's the last degree. So the sun goes into Taurus the very next day, on the 20th, and on that same day, Venus goes into Aries. So Taurus goes into your 12th house. The sun goes into your 12th house, and Venus goes into your 11th. Okay. So this is officially the period right before before your solar return, that month where you have the sun in the 12th house. So it's a time when, you've just experienced a lot of social activity. You might start to kind of wind down. You might start to kind of be a little bit less social, a little bit more contemplative, and this is quite unusual for Gemini, to say the least. And then Venus goes into the 11th house. So who knows? Venus in the 11th house can mean meeting a love interest through your friendships. It could be making some kind of money off of a dream that you've held. I wouldn't be surprised if it has some connection to that fifth house, because these two houses do oppose one another, and they have some similarities because of this. And so you may be finding that some of your dreams have been coming true, and this could be romantically as well as professionally, but you're also being very, how can I put it, contemplative, like a monk, and maybe thinking about the bigger picture, even though the bigger picture is more like the 9th house. But to me, the biggest picture is the 12th house, because it's looking at the spiritual dimension. On the 24th, okay, let me talk about the 24th and the 29th, because we have two retrogrades in outer planets, and they're both in Capricorn, and they're both affecting your 8th house. Pluto goes retrograde on the 24th in Capricorn, and Saturn on the 29th in that 8th house, both in Capricorn. Now, having these heavies in the 8th house is very interesting in and of itself. So the 8th house can be other people's money. You may have felt, Gemini, that something along the lines of money that you didn't earn is affecting you big time. So whether this is a debt, whether this is an inheritance or a spouse's income, all of this may be directly impacting you and changing your life forever. So, Pluto, it's really interesting because I didn't know this myself until I started reading about it. But Pluto in a money house, whether it be the second or the eighth house, can generate a lot of wealth, okay? To me, I see Pluto as so destructive, but it's also about power, okay? But there may be drama associated with it because Pluto doesn't play, and it can dredge up a lot of ick from, that kind of has been buried. The eighth house also, though, is the house that Pluto rules. So this could be psychological stuff. The eighth house is sexuality, and it's your magic. It's esoteric stuff, but because it's retrograding, the shadow comes out. So the shadow of sexuality. And Saturn here too, where this sense of oppression, when it relates to, this can also be addiction. It's funny how the 8th and the 12th houses have certain things in common. But to me, this is kind of like the shadow work. And it's more in an in-your-face sort of way. I think the 12th house is very karmic, even talking about past lives. And so it's more undercover, whereas the 8th house is just underneath the surface, okay? So there may be a lot of you Geminis who have been experiencing quite a bit of maybe even like heavy emotions in the past. It could even be as long as 11 years since Pluto has entered there. And also with Saturn, I mean, if you had a spouse who could not work for whatever reason, or just has not been earning as much as they used to earn, you may have felt like you had to pick up the slack and that you had to earn more money, that you couldn't rely on them. So the restriction on their income or some kind of a debt that you had to pay, and so it cut into your ability to save money, who knows? But these kinds of things may be still coming into play for you. Remember that these retrogrades are only a few months in length, so this too shall pass. And in any case, these are outer planets, so they may not personally affect you that way, although I will say that because of how long Pluto stays there, that there may be a lot of significance for you, or at least some significance for you in this regard. But in any case, that's what I have for you, Gemini. If you would like me to look at your chart personally, I'd be happy to do that. I have different types of natal chart readings, and I also have different types of readings too, love readings, that use your natal chart, and career readings in combination. So please check out my website, rainandmoonastrology.com. The link is below. Have a great April. Take care. Bye.